Mute it. Mute the audio.
Praveen sir, are we good to go?
Resource person didn't join, madam.
Yeah, she hasn't actually.
Yeah, she had to join, madam. Resource person. She didn't join. Had to join because.
Subir sir, are we waiting for Yashavama sir?
And what about the students, sir? At what time they have to join? Sir.
Tell the students to join now. If resource person is arrived, we can start the session.
Yeah, resource person had to join because she kept it in a hold and maybe.
She joined, I think. She joined, I think.
Okay. Okay, fine. We'll tell students to join now. Yeah, now join. You join.
So we'll get started then. A very good morning, everybody. My name is Ashwini Jain, and I heartily welcome you all to the second international webinar organized by the Department of Behaviour in Retail and Supply Chain Management. SDM College Ujjire is a proud administrator of 3 B vocational courses that are designed to cater to the professional requirements of the new age. As a part of the curriculum that prepares students for the national and international job market, today's webinar is organized by the Department of Retail and Supply Chain Management on the topic of marketing, focusing on the aligning of brand and customer behavior. We have with us today the resource person, Ms. Lauren D'Souza, Management Consultant, Capgemini Invent from UK. Ms. Laura, I heartily welcome you to the webinar. We understand that it is really early out there for you, and we thank you for joining us to share with us your expertise today. I also would like to recognize the presence of Dr. B. Yashavarma, the Secretary of SDME Society, with us. He'll be joining us soon. Our principal, Dr. Satish Chandra, will also be joining us. Our course coordinator, Mr. Suvir Jain, and the head of the Department of BOK in Retail and Supply Chain Management, Dr. Rakesh DS, are also present with us. I acknowledge the presence of them also. In a word, I would also like to welcome all the number of staff members of the college from different departments and the students from all the courses who are present with us today. I hope all of you have a fruitful session. I'd like to introduce our guest of the day in brief before I hand over the session for her to get started. Ms. Laura D'Souza is a management consultant with Capgemini Invent UK. She specializes in managing projects that define strategic direction and deliver improvised operational performance. She has extensive experience in strategy formulation and operational design, often delivered in collaboration with diverse teams and enabled by the implementation of new technology. Ms. Laura, we are happy to have you here with us today, and we look forward to interacting with you towards the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I request you to kindly take over for your session.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Ashwini, for the introduction. So thanks for inviting me here today. It's about 6 a.m. in the UK, so I'm based in London. So it's really nice to be able to speak to you in India. And it's also quite interesting that, everyone's working from home at the moment. So I'm speaking to you in India right now, but then later I'm going to be speaking to colleagues in Germany and in the Netherlands and Norway. So, this although COVID has been really awful for everybody, it's quite interesting as well that I suppose the silver lining is in terms of our international communities, it's perhaps making us a bit closer through technology. So thank you for inviting me here today to talk to you about branding. So I'm just going to share my screen and talk through a few slides about branding and how branding can be aligned to customer behavior. So just bear with me while I set that up. Can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, madam.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll get started. So the first question I wanted to ask is, what do these books have in common? So J.K. Rowling is a very famous author. She's written 7 Harry Potter books, and she's also written additional books such as The Casual Vacancy and Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. There's 2 musicals about the Harry Potter series. There's a Harry Potter World Studios as well, and there's a lot of merchandise. And she's actually the first author to become a billionaire, as noted by Forbes. But when she released The Casual Vacancy, critics gave her negative reviews. Her book still sold. She sold. Sorry, there's a bit of an echo. Okay, I'll continue. So in the first week of selling The Casual Vacancy, she sold 125,000 copies.
Miss Laura, I'm sorry to interrupt, but may I request Miss Krupali K to kindly mute your audio? Thank you. I'm sorry. Please carry on.
It's okay. So let me check, is there an echo now?
There isn't.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll continue. So yes, in the first week when J.K. Rowling released The Casual Vacancy, she sold 125,000 copies, but critics had given her a bad review. However, if you look at Robert Galbraith's The Cuckoo's Calling, critics gave Robert Galbraith really good reviews, but he just didn't sell books. But actually, Robert Galbraith is J.K. Rowling. It's just a pen name for her. So actually, this proved 2 things. Customers wanted to buy books which had the J.K. Rowling name on it, but also that critics wanted to perhaps criticize books which had the J.K. Rowling name on it. And that is the power of branding. So what I want to talk to you today is to give you a very, very brief history of branding, to talk a bit about the marketing mix, which is at the heart of marketing, and then to move on to placing purpose at the heart of branding and using customer experience as a differentiator to compete. So first of all, in terms of the terms marketing and branding, so marketing is really a discipline. It's about the tools and the processes and the strategies to promote your product or your service, whereas branding is more narrowly defined. It's about defining who you are as a company, and we're going to be talking about how to align that to customer behavior today, because the relationship is 2 ways. So that's what's the bit that we're going to focus on within the discipline of marketing. So first of all, let's go back to the 1500s. So the word branding comes from brand. Hear an echo, I'll stop for a second. Okay. So the word branding comes from brandir, which is from ancient Norse, and it means to burn. So that's to burn or to brand cattle for ownership. Sorry, I'll just stop. If anybody is unmuted, if you could please mute, and then I think the echo will disappear. Thank you. Okay, so from the very beginning, branding was about visual identity and it was about ownership. You could see who owned the cattle because of the branding. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see 6 of the world's most famous brands as rated by Interbrand. The other ones which I haven't got there are Apple, Samsung, Toyota, and Microsoft. So worldwide famous and very, very popular. So how do you protect branding? Well, let's move forward now to the 18th and the 19th centuries. And that's when trademarks were established. So it's thought that trademarks originally came from blacksmiths who made swords. So the mark on the sword would define who it was and the owner of the sword. But actually the first modern trademark laws emerged in France. And that was when the first trademark regime was also passed into law in 1857. This was the age of invention, the golden age of invention. There was a lot of new manufacturing techniques and standardization and reduction in unit cost. So there was a lot of efficiency, increased efficiency as well. And trademarks would protect the owners of these innovations so that what they were producing was recognizable and that their name was going on the products and services which they were providing. So today, a trademark is intellectual property. It could be a sign, a design, an expression, anything which identifies products and services from a particular source. The words brand and mark and logo, they're sometimes used interchangeably with the word trademark, but trademark is a little bit wider in terms of intellectual property. Trademark could even be a smell or a sound or a movement. It's anything which is capable of graphical representation, and to be registered as a trademark, it must actually be applied or it must be used in your product or your service. So now let's skip forward another century to the 20th century. And you've got the rise of a lot of very famous brands still in existence today. So you've got Colgate toothpaste, Ford Motor Company, Lego, you've got Chanel, you've got Coca-Cola as well. And at this point, the way that these companies were advertising was very much through magazines and through newspapers. And the type of advertisements which they were making were very much about information. So it was the functional use of the product or the service. And the relationship with the customer was really quite one way. But this starts changing in the 20th century. You've got the radio and you've got television, and that really revolutionized advertising because now you had radio jingles, songs, you had catchphrases, and the marketing became much more targeted. The first paid radio commercial was aired in 1922 in New York, and it advertised a new apartment complex. But then by 1930, 8 years later, 90% of radio stations were broadcasting commercials. And then in 1941, Bulova watches aired the first television commercial before the broadcast of a baseball game in New York. So this was really the start of marketing, which was more visual and more memorable and audible and also more relatable to the customer. And what we also saw after the First and Second World War was the expansion of the middle class. There was a population boom. So there was a lot of suburbanization, and technology was embraced further, and it was embraced in the home. Advertising now started to be found on more billboards and more subway signs and product packaging, and since 1953, also on color television. So what you can see in the 20th century is you've got a lot more marketing channels than previously, and companies were really under pressure to differentiate. So at this time, the leading brands were Procter & Gamble and General Foods and Unilever. So now I want to talk about Neil McElroy. He was actually a former US Secretary of Defense, but actually the birth of modern branding could also be assigned to him. So he worked in advertising in Procter & Gamble, and in 1931 he was tasked by his boss to develop an idea to separate branding teams within the Procter & Gamble portfolio. And what he understood was that sales and branding is different, and he advocated for a new role of brand men. So some of the things that he advocated for were to analyze data, look at units sold, look at your effort and your output, look at past successes in advertising and the promotion history. He also talked about studying the sellers' personalities and the consumers' personalities and find the pain points in the whole customer journey and try to resolve them. He said that you should work alongside salespeople as well, and you should monitor the impact of your. And he also encouraged people to take responsibility for their marketing and to consult, for example, to consult with district managers in the area. So now we're kind of at the stage of modern marketing, where what I want to say is we are not just following the customer up to the point of custom, we're actually following them beyond to every interaction with your company or with your product and your service. So it's every aspect of that. Okay. And So for example, if you need a replacement part for a product that you've bought, or maybe there's a missing part, whenever you go to that company and you say, I want this missing part, that's a customer interaction, and that's also an opportunity for marketing. And so there's a shift. It's not just about people giving custom and being customers, it's about people consuming the product or the service. And that's when the value is actually realized. It's in the consumption, and it's not just in buying, in providing custom. Theodore Levitt wrote a paper on marketing myopia in the 1960s, and he saw the whole idea of marketing quite differently. He thought that brands actually need to focus on meeting human needs, and hence the quote, people don't want quarter-inch drills, they want quarter-inch holes. So he thought that companies needed to change. They needed to meet human needs. They should not just focus on producing products in growth industries and hoping to make a profit. And so he gave an example of the railway. The railway is not just in the industry of rail, it's in the industry of meeting the need for transport, which is a different way of seeing the provision of goods and services. And it's very, very core actually to modern marketing now. So I'd like to focus just briefly on the marketing mix. But first of all, what is expected of marketing these days? Well, marketing fulfills three functions. First of all, it's to elevate any positive associations with the company. And perhaps if you've had a positive association with a company, you might have told a friend, and that's good for the company. It's to reduce the negative associations as well. If you had a bad interaction, perhaps you've written them a bad review online. And it's to protect the identity of the brand if there are any public relations issues. And I'll give you an example of why this is important. So PwC created a report on customer experience, and they surveyed 15,000 customers. They find that 1 in 3 customers will leave a brand after just one bad experience. And actually 92% will leave a band, they will abandon a band after 2 or 3 negative interactions. So it's really important to get your marketing right. So now I'd like to briefly cover the traditional aspects of the marketing mix, which apply to services. And this is quite important to understand also how to manage this positive and negative interactions. So I'll just go through one by one. The first one is product. So I've given you an example here of Apple iPhone. Their product is the physical product that they sell. It's basically anything that is sold. And Apple is known for its very simplistic designs. But equally, Samsung is known because Samsung is considered to be the rival to Apple. It's the anti-Apple for people who don't like Apple products. And Samsung is the leader when it comes to premium Android operating systems. Place. So place is how you distribute or how you allow access to your product or service. This could be anything from a warehouse, it could be a high street store, it could be online, it could be on a platform of some kind. And to give you an example, when Bill Gates had the invention or the idea of having a premium operating service, he did not create Microsoft computers. What he did instead is he Microsoft Windows operating system to computer manufacturers. And that was much more lucrative because he could leverage the power of those other companies to sell Microsoft operating systems. Next, promotion. So promotion could be the traditional avenues, which I've already discussed, so TV, radio, billboards, but there's also the more modern methods. So anything like web content, podcasts, emails, push notifications, influencing, and celebrity endorsements. So for example, Cristiano Ronaldo is also known as the walking billboard. He's one of the most wealthy athletes, and he's got a lot of endorsement deals. For example, he has deals with Herbalife, Tag Heuer, EA Sports, KFC, Toyota, and he's been the face of Nike since 2003. He's got multiple trademark products with Nike, and in 2016, he signed a deal with them for $1 billion US. So that's how lucrative that promotion is. Next, people. So people, I think, is often overlooked, but people is anybody who is directly or indirectly involved with the business side of the enterprise. And I'll give you an example of a positive interaction, which I read about online by Lego. So Lego has a missing pieces service. And this means that if I buy a Lego set and if I have a piece missing, I can tell them I have a piece missing and they will replace it for me and they will send me a personalized apology. So I read about a very sweet interaction online where a boy had a Lego set and when he was out shopping one day, he just lost a piece and decided to write to the company to say, I want a replacement piece. So he got a replacement piece and he got a personalized apology and he also got an extra piece. And just by providing that one extra piece, that probably means that Lego has gained a lifelong customer in that boy and probably in his parents as well, because that was a positive interaction for them. But employees do have to understand what the brand is first. And that can be an issue in itself. So I've got a statistic here. So a report by the Brand Inside showed that for 60% of organizations, it was unclear who was responsible for building internal brand so that this would support the external promises to customers. But everybody is really part of the brand. So employees need to be aware of it. They need to know the strategy. They need to be advocates and motivated. And their behaviors need to align to what the brand messaging is as well. So it's a really important differentiator, especially when it comes to customer experience. Process. So Amazon is a great example of process being done well, because this is just a series of actions taken to deliver a product or a service. And Amazon has extremely quick fulfillment. So if I order something tonight, it might be on my doorstep by tomorrow. Price. Well, pure and simple, price is what you price the product or service to be, but it should also reflect what your customer perceives the value of your product or service to be, and it should correlate with the cost in producing it. So to give you the example of Louis Vuitton, it's a luxury brand. It never goes on sale. It doesn't have outlet stores either. So you will not get a discounted Louis Vuitton product. And that's what they've chosen to do. They've chosen this premium pricing. They've chosen exclusivity and luxury. And lastly, the physical aspect of the marketing mix. So that's quite obvious when it comes to products. But even when it comes to services such as education, the physical evidence might be the certificate that you get at the end of your degree, for example. So that's the 7 Ps of marketing. Arguably, there could be another one, purpose, which I will get into now, which we'll discuss. And first of all, I'd just like to highlight this quote by Simon Sinek: people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So he delivered a very famous and very popular TED Talk in 2009, which was called Start With Why. And he talked about what he calls the golden circle. So he uses this image, and that explains the correlation. So that explains the correlation between marketing messages and how the human brain processes information. Many marketing strategies actually focus on these outside rings, which you can see, so the what and the how. And this will convey the features and the benefits of the product, but it won't necessarily enable somebody to buy it. And that's the difference, because better branding starts with why. It starts in the middle of the golden circle, conveys value. So as Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. It distinguishes companies from their competitors. So it's not just about the functional use of the product, as we saw in the 20th century. Now branding is much more about the experience, and it's much more emotional, if you like. And this is just a good example by Starbucks. So Starbucks' mission statement is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. But also Starbucks sells coffee. So, the mission statement is very aspirational. And this is another example. So this is an advertisement which Nike produced, and it stars Colin Kaepernick. And this advertisement actually won the Outstanding Commercial Award at the Creative Arts Emmys in 2019. It's called Dream Crazy. And the slogan is believe in everything, and believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. So this is because Colin Kaepernick started to kneel for the pre-game national anthem in the US to protest about racial injustice. And he started doing this in 2016. When Nike released this advertisement with his face in it, their stocks rose by 5%. So you can see that, yes, you have purpose, but it's no longer just a box to tick. It's actually arguably entered the marketing mix, and it's become much more prominent and much more important, even for selling your product and for the value of your company. So Nike is a really good example because of their relaunch around their slogan, "Just Do It." And they champion the causes of minorities, and they also challenge female stereotypes in sports. So then going back to that marketing mix, if you just declare that you have a purpose, that's not necessarily going to win you any customers, because there is a new set of expectations. And if you fail to deliver on them, then actually that could become a negative association or a negative interaction with your product or your service or your company. So just the statistics, so Kantar's Global Business Compass survey showed that 34% of businesses plan to play an increased role in supporting society. And also it's been shown in other research by BrandZ that companies which had a strong purpose grew more than double that of their competitors between 2006 to 2018. So you can see there is a real correlation with the performance of the company as well. So some tips that I've read online about how to create a genuine and an authentic purpose is to check if there's any disconnect between your brand and between your behavior as well. And also to check if it makes sense in terms of what your purpose is and what you're selling. So 2 examples, Patagonia, the logo's on the bottom right, they sell outdoor clothing and other outdoor gear. So what their purpose is also to care for the environment. And you can see this is very nicely aligned for their customers, because it seems like they support the environment and they also provide outdoor clothing. And then Ben & Jerry's is a very different example, because they also support environmental issues and social issues. But at the same time, they've managed to fit that purpose into their very nice, very fun marketing around their ice cream. So I wanted to tell you some statistics actually around just how important purpose is for customers. So a couple of questions. Is having a strong purpose important? Well, in a global survey, 94% of people said it was, and 83% said that companies should only earn a profit if they deliver a positive impact. Next question, would you act in support of a purposeful brand? So this is where it gets interesting and you start to see generational differences, because 92% of Generation Z said yes, they would. But if you look at respondents who were aged 74 and upwards, only 73% said that. Next, should a brand have a purpose that you personally believe in? Again, very different. So Generation Z and Millennials said yes, 70% of them said yes, but only 48% of boomers and matures said yes. Would you take an action in response to your brand if they do something that you disagree with? So the majority of customers, 76%, have done this in the survey. And that could be, for example, just not buying the brand or switching to a competitor or discouraging others from buying that brand. And again, you have generational differences. So 88% of Generation Z said they would take an action in response. But that declines for customers aged 74 and above to just 62%. And what are the most important attributes of a purposeful brand? So I've got them on the right of my screen. And again, some quite interesting facts around this. It differs by region. So in North America and in Europe, employee treatment was number one. It was the most important. But then in Asia, actually, producing products and services which reflect the needs of the society and of people today was the most important. So now I'd like to talk about experience as a differentiator. So there's different ways to compete with your competitors. There's efficiency, so cost, or there's effectiveness, quality, and there's experience. And experience is really what we are focusing on today. But let's just quickly cover the other 2 points to explain why that's not such a good way to compete anymore. So cost or efficiency. Well, there's only ever one lowest cost provider. And cost is just one factor that consumers consider when they decide to buy something new. Also, cost efficiency is harder and harder to reduce as actually manufacturing gets more and more advanced. And lastly, there is so much information online for consumers today. They can easily compare. They can compare which product is cheapest or where do I buy this product so that I get the best value for my money. So it is much more difficult to compete on cost. Effectiveness or quality. So again, it's quite difficult now because in many markets, actually the products are very high spec, they're very good quality, and it's not so much of a differentiator anymore, but it's just a minimum requirement that consumers ask for. So the small differences in quality might not be enough to capture the attention of consumers. And we've actually seen that products are starting to become a little bit more homogenous, a bit more like a commodity. And that's where branding or your experience as well really changes the value for the consumer. So that's why experience is the most important. And I'll give you an example, thinking back to Starbucks. So Starbucks wants to create a third space. So the first space is home, your second space is your workplace. And the third space, Starbucks wants the third space to be their cafe. They want that to be where you meet your friends or you read a book. So actually the physical experience for the customer is very important to brands like Starbucks. And whenever you have customer experience, then you become much more customer centric when that's what you're competing on. Research by Kantar shows a disconnect actually, because 91% of CEOs find that being customer centric is essential, but only 19% of UK customers believed that their brands were customer central. So we've talked a lot about how experience is important to foster, so to have that good experience, but how can we actually do that in practice? Well, actually there's countless strategies and it changes so frequently. But 2 things we could look at are data and also channels. So the first point I wanted to make was that a lot of the data which companies collect is actually out of date, or it might be quite ad hoc, or it might have gaps in it as well. And so this is problematic because the markets move so quickly. So if you're using out of date information, then it's not really going to help to make a decision about your marketing. And businesses also need to be careful about the amount of data which they're gathering, because if they have too much data, and if it's just transactional, then that means that the branding and the marketing that they create, the strategies, is going to be very reactive. And the problem there is that the company doesn't have an anchor. They don't have a central message that they're trying to get across anymore. So what they should do is they should protect that central proposition. Yes, they should be informed by data, but they should not be blinded by having too much data. And they should also look at what's called the voice of the customer. So the voice of the customer could be found out by focus groups and by surveys, by questionnaires, etc., by reviews. But really, the voice of the customer will tell the company what that customer journey is like at every interaction. So even after you've bought your product or your service, and it's really valuable. Next, channels. So omnichannels is something which is talked about quite a lot at the moment. So omnichannels is this idea that actually how you access a company is, well, as a customer, you're actually agnostic of how you access that company. So whether that's online or, but for COVID, if you could go into a shop, then that would be another channel, or if in any way that you interact and engage with them. There's so many different channels out there. But what is important is that for every channel, every mention of your company, that there is a consistent message and you do have that central proposition. So companies are investing much more in making sure that they have this omni-channel awareness. A report by PwC showed that actually about 80% of companies are investing in improving omni-channel experience. And also, it's important to pay attention to trends. According to StatCounter, 52% of all internet traffic is now done through mobile devices. So that's actually a decline from the use of desktop. And that's also quite important whenever you're deciding what your branding is and what your marketing is, because suddenly you've got a different channel, you've got maybe a smaller screen, and so your message might change a little bit, and the visuals which you use. And the next, technology. So technology is always changing, but something quite interesting is that in 2019, a quarter of all customer interactions were automated. So that was using AI and it was using machine learning. And 90% of companies are planning to deploy further AI in the next couple of years, in the next 3 years. So it's important to keep in touch with your technology trends as well. And finally, I want to finish on a very interesting case study about Harley Davidson. So Harley Davidson was established in 1903, and in the 20th century, its major competitors were Honda and also Yamaha. Honda and Yamaha had very strong engineering, Japanese engineering techniques, and so this was a real challenge for Harley Davidson. But they rebranded themselves, and they rebranded themselves as an American icon. They had very masculine bikes. They had easily customizable builds. And what they really did well is they created a customer experience, and they crafted a very loyal following of motorcycle enthusiasts. And the core of this was community building. So how did they do this? Well, they had Harley owner groups, or HOGs. And what these were is this was a group whereby if you're a member of the group, you can host events and you can engage with tours, initiatives. So really it's promoting and protecting the exclusivity of owning a Harley Davidson. And this was because Harley Davidson, they realized that if you own a motorbike, it's not very much fun if it just sits in your, sits outside your home and you don't use it. It's much more fun if you can create a connection with other people who also have the similar hobby to you. And that is what creates something valuable. And that's what their customers wanted. So it actually created a whole myth, a whole culture around Harley Davidson motorbikes. And it gained almost cult-like status. But it has changed in recent years. The problem now is that Harley Davidson buyers are male, they're aged 55 and over, and they've got a comfortable disposable income. So the problem is that Harley Davidson hasn't really invested in looking at other target consumer groups. And their consumers or their customers are aging and they're outgrowing their interest in Harley Davidson cycles. So Harley Davidson's marketing has been much too rigid. They're engaging with too few people, and they haven't been able to accommodate that sort of natural consumer succession over the years. And actually their brand image, it can also be harmful to other customer segments, because not everybody identifies with their kind of rough and tumble independent rider image. So it's actually alienating younger generations. And it could mean that they actually avoid buying Harley Davidsons. And things have also been bad for Harley Davidson in recent years because of Trump's policies. So, for example, there were steel price rises due to tariffs. There was a limit on overseas production, and there were also retaliatory European Union tariffs on the import of Harley Davidson motorbikes into the European Union. So Forbes estimates that all of these policies meant that actually Harley Davidson's value decreased by 1.4 million US dollars during those years. And to really put that in perspective again, their world sales, their retail sales across the world, declined by 10% between 2017 and 2019. Their brand ranking by Interbrand dropped, and between 2015 and 2020, their sales decreased in the US every single year and their share price halved. So what's going wrong for Harley Davidson? Well, a lot of it has been attributed to their weak marketing strategy because they're not able to capture the attention of a younger audience, of a new generation of motorcycle riders. So what are they doing about that? Well, they are quite reluctant to change, or they were at first. In 2018, their former senior vice president said that motorbikes are not for everybody and they never will be. It's a product that people can take to an extreme as a means of self-expression. They are changing slowly though. So the motorbikes you see on the screen are actually electric Livewire motorbikes by Harley Davidson. And that's because the company is trying to engage with a new customer profile. Now they're targeting consumers between the age of 22 and 38. They're targeting millennials with an above average income. So they're still keeping up that sort of premium aspect of their brand. But you know, this consumer group is very different to the typical consumer group, the 55-year-old male with an above average disposable income. So for example, younger riders, they don't want big bikes which they can use for recreation and for leisure. They want convenience and they want ease of transportation, and they don't care so much about that prestige. They also have really strong opinions on the environment in comparison to other generations. So, for example, the Livewire is the way that Harley Davidson has tried to counteract this. So the Livewire is electric, and it's hoped that this will address those environmental concerns which the younger target audience has. But it hasn't been as successful in generating excitement amongst the younger buyers as it should be. And there could be lots of different reasons for this. It could be that, okay, yes, this Livewire bike is more environmentally friendly, but their image hasn't changed. Their branding still hasn't changed, and they still have a legacy, and there are still other associations with Harley Davidson. So probably what they should have done is they should have maybe changed their branding and their advertising campaigns as well to match what that younger target audience is looking for. And the next reason is their pricing strategy. So actually these live wires are quite expensive. It's around 30,000 US dollars to buy a live wire. And you can compare that to the Tesla Model 3, which is 35,000 US dollars. So that's who they're competing with. They're competing with these younger, more modern brands, but Harley Davidson still has a lot of their prestige, which they built up in the 20th century. And the next thing is actually how they've gone about marketing it. So first of all, they haven't offered many incentives to buy. I talked about pricing as part of the marketing mix earlier, and they haven't offered any discounts or any promotions in that way. And also, their product placement took place a little bit too early. So they started to place their product in 2015, whenever they collaborated with the blockbuster movie Avengers: Age of Ultron. And they just wanted to see what the customer reaction was by placing their product in that movie. But that was arguably done too far ahead of the actual launch of the Livewire. So yes, in principle, maybe that placement was a good idea, but when it was done at the wrong time, it was less effective. So I just want to end now to recap on the story I've told you today. So we started with the power of branding, about how J.K. Rowling's name actually sells her books, potentially more than the writing herself. We also talked about branding, where it comes from the 1500s, from the word brandir, which is ancient Norse. And we talked about the importance of protecting ownership, especially in the golden age of invention in the 19th century. Then we moved on to all of the technological changes in the 20th century, the growing middle class, and the fact that technology was used in the home. We then went on to talk about modern branding, where Neil McElroy distinguished between branding and sales. And there was a recognition that, yes, they're different, but they need to work together. Then we covered the marketing mix, the 7 Ps. And arguably the 8th P would be purpose, where Nike was a really good example with its Just Do It campaign, which champions minorities in sports. We then talked about experience and how experience is a key differentiator, and it's really the core of marketing and of competing with your competitors. And finally, we ended on a case study of Harley Davidson and how they built this really great brand in the 20th century, how it declined, and what they're doing to address that. So I hope that's been useful for you today to understand roughly the journey of marketing and how branding has to align with the changing customer behaviors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Laura. It has been a very informative session. The very new perspective that you have offered in terms of aligning branding in terms of customer behavior is very new to us, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. And we understand it's a rather inconvenient time for you to be a part of this session, but thank you very much for making it nonetheless. Before we open the floor to questions, I'd like to just take one small moment and recognize the presence of Dr. B. Yashavarma, the Secretary of SDME Society. Sir, we are very happy that you are a part of this session today. So now the floor is open to questions. If anybody wants to pose a question to Ms. Laura, I believe she'll be happy to take them. Participants may unmute your audio and pose your questions in case you'd like to pose one.
So think
Very
I'll
good
start.
morning. Hello.
Okay, sorry, somebody's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I think
Yashavarma, Secretary.
Thank
Thank you, Laura. It has been very nice listening to you. You gave a global perspective with regard to the marketing and branding. So one thing, I'm also a fan of Apple. One thing always astonishes me is why I, keep always logging for Apple products. Though there are lots of options before me, every time when I have to make a choice, first thing that comes to my mind is Apple, and then I'm not in a position to shift to any other brand. And it is the case with many, I believe. And we feel that, pride of having Apple products. And also when when somebody looks at it, they say, oh, you have Apple. So what is it that makes that so great?
I think that's a great example of how Apple is actually, it's not just selling you a phone or some other device, it's selling you an experience, and it's selling you an idea, and it's selling you what it believes in. So it's the simplicity. You're not buying it because it's got great specs, and it does, but you're actually buying it because it has much more value than just that. Because arguably there would be cheaper phones on the market which have similar specs, but they just don't have the power of the Apple brand.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, somebody.
Okay, I believe, Laura, would you be okay if the host has a question for you?
Of course, yeah.
I'd like to ask you, have you observed patterns in terms of changing brand identity with regard to customer behavior with digital marketing? Because with the advent of digital marketing, customer behavior has become all the more important. And customer studies have become so much more profound than they used to be in traditional marketing. So do you see patterns, and do you see areas for development?
Yeah, so I think also because of the COVID crisis as well, digital marketing is even more important. So that's the first thing to mention. I think it's really accelerated. And with digital marketing, now the company is so close to the customer. So the experience that the company should create is much more individualized, and it's much more integrated in the customer's life. So I think there's a lot more opportunity for that two-way dialogue between the customer and between the company. So I think that trend is one that's continuing. I think that the demands of customers just keep increasing on companies as well. And although, the point was made about being very loyal to Apple, also we see that customers are much more likely to take action against companies which don't meet their expectations than before. So it's really become, I think, just much more competitive and much more difficult to build a brand and to maintain it.
Right. Thank you so much. I'd like to pose some of the questions that are coming through WhatsApp, through the WhatsApp group. Ms. Divya wants to know, how do you think influencer marketing is influencing brand identity?
Yeah, so I think I think it's interesting because you could link it to the celebrity endorsements as well. So celebrity endorsements, fine, you've got the name of the celebrity and their brand in themselves, but influencing, it's quite interesting because influencers might have millions of followers, or there are also micro influencers who don't have that many followers, but they're very strategic and they're very good at placing products. And it links into the omni-channel experience also, which I mentioned, where even when you're finding out about a new product or service through an influencer, even that is a point of interaction. So yeah, I think that they are very important. It's also very interesting that, again, it's just an example of how much closer consumers are coming to the products and the services which are being sold to them, because you might be a consumer, but you also might be an influencer, and then you have this multiplier effect.
Right. Thank you. There's another person who wants to know, what is the difference you see in branding and marketing in India and UK?
So I don't know if I could talk with too much authority on that, I'm afraid. I think I'll decline to answer that because I wouldn't know enough about Indian marketing to be perfectly honest. I think that probably a lot of the characteristics would be the same. And some of the companies which I've been talking about, your Apple and Samsung and Toyota and all of these ones, well, the reason why I chose those brands to talk about is because they are the top 10 most valuable brands and most recognized brands across the world. So, they will have different marketing strategies based on geographical region and based on demographics and lots of other different ways to segment your market. I think that's where the differentiation comes in, because the companies, they want to figure out, what are the characteristics and what are the demands or the requirements of customers in each, let's say, geographical market, and that would differ. But as to how that differs, that's a difficult one to say. I think there are so many factors. It will also depend on your industry as well. So to give you an example, German cars are very popular here and really quite common. But I think then the types of cars that you would buy in India would be different. There would be different companies and different brands that you would go for.
Thank you. That question was by Murshid. Samprita wants to know that if it's a very difficult thing to brand yourself if you are a startup.
Yeah, that's very true. So I think, and that's a really good way where influencing can play a part. So having that social media presence and having people who will just, as I say, multiply your reputation, like people who will talk about you. So word of mouth is, I think, a really effective way of doing that, because also as a startup, yes, marketing is really important, but also you do have limited resources and you have to, allocate your budget. So yeah, influencing, word of mouth, those kind of more maybe grassroots ways of marketing are quite useful. So just building that reputation through people.
Right.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Laura. This is Madhushri from Department of Commerce, and I have a question with regards to marketing as I deal with marketing. So, branding and customer behavior are two most complex marketing process which a company possess. So, with respect to pandemic being taking away the global market into struggle, what is your opinion with respect to branding and customer behavioral changes and complexity in place?
Yeah. So I think time will tell. So it's a really interesting question because the COVID pandemic keeps changing, and countries are affected in different ways. So of course India is very badly affected at the moment. The UK is getting out of it, hopefully. But then if you look at, for example, Korea or South Korea or Australia, well, they are much better again at controlling the pandemic. So it's difficult to say, but I think probably if we look to the countries which are recovering quicker, then we can see what the impact is on customer behavior. We know that customers are actually changing the way they shop. So they are shopping online, whereas previously people might have shopped more in person physically. So that's a really obvious example. But actually that's probably going to be a long-term change as well because of the convenience. And we've seen a change, I think, in the markets as well. So that the new startups which are being developed, a lot more of it is now about the convenience for the consumer, and a lot of it is really a lot of new delivery startups, for example. And I think that plays into marketing as well, because you're changing how you actually deliver deliver your product. So you're changing the placement of it as well, and how people are interacting with your company.
Oh, thank you very much, Laura. And one more question. Now AI being in place, and it has been a very great opportunity for the companies to study about customer behavior is considered. So being on the greater opportunity side, okay, though customer behavior is complex process, yes, digital world has made it more easier, one thing. And the second thing is repositioning of markets, resegmentation of markets. I think that is much more needed right now with respect to the pandemic. So what's your opinion?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because for example, if you segment your customer market based on the age group, let's say, that's not that helpful, because within every age group there are going to be, for example, different lifestyle choices. So, and that will maybe determine whether a person buys your company or buys your brand or buys a different brand. So yeah, I think the really good thing about AI is that it's able to give you this really rich data picture, and it's able to look at the better segmentation of consumers, really. And it's able to see, I think, more richer data about how they're interacting with the brand, in terms of maybe like what platform do they use, or what time are they more likely to buy something, or if they buy brand X, are they more likely to buy brand Y, even things like that. It's a much richer picture, but as I said, the difficulty is actually finding the experts in AI, so finding the analysts who can take all of this information and figure out what it says. So what story is it telling, and how does that become the basis of decision making? That's a really difficult skill.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Thank you so much. I think major global brands have a chatbot in action. So every customer, if they could access to chatbots, I think chatbots are providing major customer friendly or user friendly accessibility to major information are considered. So I agree that there's huge opportunity for the analysts AI as well as technical analysts are considered. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take one final question from the chat box. Karthik wants to know if you have any suggestions to make in terms of moving a newly established product. He has specifically mentioned nutrition products. So if you have any suggestions to make.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? The
He
first
wants
part?
to know if you have any suggestions in terms of moving or building a newly established product, such as a nutrition product.
Yeah. So I think the first bit is the research. So checking out what are your competitors doing, how are they marketing, and who are they targeting, and then also deciding whether you want to go into that direct competition or whether you want to differentiate. And well, I would suggest that you differentiate. And as we spoke about, you can differentiate on the brand or on the customer experience. But in order to know how to differentiate, you do need to know the market and you need to know what else is being done in that space. Because really you want to be a pioneer. You don't want to be playing, or you don't want to be the second person to do something. So that's why I would say start with your market research, look at what the competitors are doing. So you got that side of it, but also I think just go back and reflect on the why. So why are you selling this nutritional product? And again, it's going back to you're not selling it because you want people to buy it. You're selling it because you want to fulfill a need. So it's that I've mentioned two approaches, but then it's actually finding a way to combine those approaches, and hopefully that will help with your how you differentiate yourself and your brand.
Thank you. I think we have time for probably one final question, if anybody is interested to ask.
Ashwini ma'am, can I?
Yes, please.
Ma'am Laura, this is Ashwit from BWOC, again a faculty from STM College. Ma'am, with regards to brand awareness and brand positioning, in India especially, there are a few companies which get into the market with a lot of brand awareness programs or advertisements or promotional activities, which of course needs huge investment. And also there are some other companies which give quality products and the products at reasonable price. Later on, because of its less price and good quality, they become a reputed brand. So which one you suggest? What's your comment on that?
Sorry, what's my comment on? Sorry, can you repeat?
Like there are types of companies in India especially, and maybe in UK and other countries also, where some companies get into the market with lot of promotional activities to position their brand name in the mind of the people. On the other hand, some companies which don't do much of effort to create a brand awareness, but because of their good quality and reasonable price, they become a reputed brand and they position themselves in the mind of the people.
Yeah. So I actually think it's just different approaches to marketing, because I think, in the first category, which you mentioned, yeah, the companies are putting a lot of very, very obvious efforts into their brand and into how they sell their product. But in the second category, if you like, they might not be investing so much money, but they probably are investing in word of mouth. So they're hoping that if they sell you something which has really good quality, or they've just treated you really well, that you're going to tell somebody else and you will effectively promote the product for them. So it's a very nice, a very much more subtle way of marketing, but it is still a marketing strategy in itself.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Can we wind up the question and answer session if we do not have any more questions? All right.
Yes.
All right then. Thank you, Laura. I would like to ask Dr. Nagendra, the faculty of BWOC and the convener of this webinar, to speak a few words of gratitude.
I would love to thank Ms. Laura D'Souza for sparing your valuable time with us and This session was so fruitful, and then you enlightened our knowledge on these different dimensions of marketing and branding. On behalf of our management and then our institute, I thank you for sparing your valuable time with us, and I look forward to have your continuous support in days to come. Many thanks to you. And I would like to thank Dr. Yashovarma sir, our secretary, and then Dr. Satish Chandra sir, principal of our college, our institute, for their continuous support. And I also would like to thank all HODs of our department and neighboring sister institutes, and then HODs of other college, and then faculties from other institutes, and then all participants, students from my college, and then students friends from all other institutes for their valuable presence. Really, I'm happy to say that this session really benefited all of us. Many thanks for all your valuable presence. And I request all of you to stay safe, stay healthy. Many thanks, all of you. Thank you, Ananda.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Laura, again. We hope at some point of time we'll have an offline session with you here at SDM. And for the notice of the contestants, we have put the link to the feedback form on the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback form in order to avail your certificate. Thank you very much then.
Thank you.